without going into a lot of unnecessary detail, I just have to say that the land tenure system across Africa has been chaotic because we inherited a colonial system that, abolished the land tenure system prior to the colonization, prior to 1885. So, in Uganda, some kinds of tenancy are called milo, meaning mile, but it's irrelevant. The key thing is to remember that land tenure has been a problem. Land management in Africa in general, we don't have consistency between one area and the next. Land rights are a big issue, and they have restricted the growth of Africa over the last 100 years because it's, we have commodified land now. It's possible to buy land which was not possible years ago, and that's got a problem. Maybe what we could do, what I can say is that we need to have a different system of managing land. And there have been, the issues that are facing Africans are not different from, say, Australia or North America or Europe, because in North America, land was taken from the Native Americans. In some cases, they were killed off and given to commercial interests, people who could simply just build and sell for money, and settler communities who perhaps did not have value the property they got in the same way that others did. They may have seen it as a way to extract wood and other resources to make money quickly. That was the function of the land. A better model than the systems of tenure we have in Uganda now is the land trust system, the community land trusts. Community land trusts are new in the world. I think the oldest ones in Australia from 1977. There are some from the US, actually a bit older. I think 1969. There was a land trust set up in, I think, New York by Pan-Africanists at that time, civil rights activists. So what a land trust does is that it makes land affordable for community members to keep, so that it's not commercialized or sent out, or that land prices don't rise based on market demand and supply rules of capitalism. In Uganda, we have set up I think a community land trust for Busongora, for this community here, this kingdom. It's called the Busongora Community Land Trust. And we have prohibited selling of land. So the land trust is run by community members. They are elected by the community, they are trustees, and the trust answers to the Minister of Lands in Uganda, in the state, in Kampala. In the event that you need to change the rules on the constitution, you have to apply directly to the government, and the government has to review it. And basically, this is the only way to prevent community land from being converted into what they call private freehold, or leases, or commercial land plots for sale. When you sell land, you displace a lot of people who then cannot afford to buy land of their own, and so what you're creating is a class of millions of landless people in a country who become a labor reserve for low-skilled work, because they're not going to be able to get the services of an education and health and whatever. So then you're creating what they call an underclass, because they have no access to land. This is a problem in Europe for many, many years. It created what they call the class warfare thing that led to communism and all that, and people complaining and saying, somebody is rich because they're landowners. Well, the definition of a rich person was a landowner. But how that came to be that somebody could own, one individual or one family could own, hundreds of square miles of land, and on which everybody is born into that land is a tenant. They have to work to support that class, that individual, that family, right? This led to resentment. It led to Karl Marx coming up with a theory and comparing, we don't have this kind of tenure in Africa. We have because the land trust system was simply, the people who designed it simply looked at the traditional African system that existed and then, you know, found the legal way to explain it in American legal terms. But land trusts are not unusual. The land was always held in trust for the people in all the so-called indigenous communities. You don't own land. The community does. They give it to you to use for your lifetime. And you can transfer your plot to your son if the community agrees. If the person or if your child or your friend or whoever you're transferring to is an upstanding community member. So once that system was displaced and they said, you know what, you can sell land, then you create underclass. Anybody who can't afford to buy land goes to the city to become a slum dweller or a laborer in a factory somewhere making shoes, you know, at $1 a day or whatever. And this is what's causing conflict. And you can't solve that class problem. What they tried initially to solve that class problem using, you know, you asked me a question about Amilcar Cabral at some point. You know, Karl Marx came up and said, you know, there has to be, these are classes, the landowners who own the means of production, and everybody else who's either a middle class, you know, commercial person who's working for these people, or the laborers who are working for him who have nothing. So they said, you know what, if we have a revolution, we'll take the land back. So they created something called revolutionary violence, which is now referred to as terrorism, but that time it was revolutionary violence. And you know, the independence movement grew out of land movements, you know, land revolutions. The American Revolution grew out of you know, taxes over land issues. You know, all land is always an issue, but it created a class system, and then they said, okay, let's have class warfare. The poor people need to take charge of the country, so they had revolutions all over the world, and they cut off the heads of state, of kings, and all that kind of stuff. And they legitimized war. When we ended up in wars in Europe until 1945, when the Soviet Union, after in about 10 years after the Second World War, decided that class warfare was no longer an achievable goal, that they could not simply do revolution anymore because of atomic weapons. You see, if you fire an atomic weapon, you cannot fire at one class. You cannot isolate people to execute. You know, if you fire an atomic weapon, you destroy people and you destroy the land. So then you won't have land after, because it will be contaminated with radiation forever, right? So then Gorbachev and the others come up with a system and say, you know what, we need to stop this class warfare thing, and we're not going to do world revolution anymore. We need to cooperate, right? The Africans also came to the same conclusion separately for different reasons. They said, you know what, the independence struggle has limitations. You can't simply say you're going to create an independent state, because there's no such thing as independence on a planet that's you know, circular. You know, it's a spherical planet. You need to cooperate with people, whether they were bad people before, or good people, or whatever. They were your oppressors yesterday. We think it's useful to now say, okay, fine. You know, you built New York City and the stock exchange with the cruel slave labor of our ancestors. But are we going to say we will never trade with the US or buy any product from them because it was obtained through the theft of the lives of people? But yet we wear clothes now, you know, from innovations from the US. We know the cost of those things. It's blood, it's not money. So the issue for us is now, you've got to realize that the entire planet is underdeveloped and has a land problem. It's not just Uganda, it's not just, you know, central Uganda with the Miloland issue. It's not Africa only. Everywhere constraints on land use and resource extraction is real. Poor people who are cutting trees, corporations that are cutting trees, people who are doing mining and dumping toxic waste in the lakes, all those things are no longer just confined to one country. The environment is one, it's not divided up into states. So we are realizing now that everybody matters, whether you're low class, upper class, middle class, black, white, whatever, rich or poor. We're all poorer, regardless of how much money we might have individually. If you own a private jet with what you call it, air conditioning, but you're flying over refugee camps and you're avoiding flying over areas where there's war, and you have to refuel knowing that the fuel price is coming from, is being dictated by a guy called Putin in Russia, who's invaded another country without a UN resolution condemning what he calls Nazis who are doing ethnic cleansing allegedly in Ukraine, but he didn't go to the world to ask for a resolution to condemn Ukraine before he attacked it. Had he done that, he might have attacked it legally. But there is no, I don't think there was a resolution saying that Ukraine had committed ethnic cleansing against Russians. So, he attacked. So the thing is this, right? And he attacks because he's got a land problem, right? There's a production problem. So I think that we need to understand the whole planet right now is a planet with land issues. Land is being degraded. In a way, the entire world is a third world planet. It's no longer there's a first world or second world. All that's nonsense now. Yeah, we are all in need of innovations to solve problems, because the problems are no longer local; they're all global now. So we need to figure out how to resolve these issues without killing ourselves and everybody else with us. We need to interdepend. We need communities to cooperate and work together. And we need communities to have autonomy, so they're not integrated or absorbed by force. So, those communities that want to be agrarian and live, without technology should be free to do that. But they should also be free, if they want some help, to be able to reach a station with a phone and say, you know what, we've just discovered a virus in the Amazon that we need a lab in New York to look at, and solve our problem right now. That's all. So the world is small. But since you asked about Milo land, I think the best system to have now is community land trusts. Anybody interested in finding that out should go on the internet. There's a lot of resources on that.
Well, let me hear you say,